The air in Michael Curtiz's office was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of old paper. Sunlight, struggling to cut through the Los Angeles haze, painted long stripes across his mahogany desk, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. Curtiz, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the demands of 1,000 film sets, leaned back in his leather chair, a lit cigar held loosely between his fingers. He squinted at the framed posters on the wall. Casablanca, Mildred Pierce, Yankee Doodle, Dandy, each one a monument to his long and illustrious career. He was a master, a perfectionist, a legend, which made the stack of glossy photographs on his desk even more irritating. Elvis Presley, he muttered, the name a foreign, somewhat ridiculous sound on his tongue. He poked at one of the pictures, with his cigar almost singeing the edge. It was a shot of a young man with a rebellious pompadour, eyes full of a raw, almost untamed energy. A guitar slung low. He was undeniably handsome, in a wild, almost dangerous way. But Curtiz wasn't interested in handsome. He was interested in acting, and from what he'd seen a few clips of Presley gyrating on television, the screams of hysterical teenagers, this young man was a singer, a sensation, yes, an actor. That remained to be seen, and Curtiz Paramount had been hounding him for weeks. He's box office gold, Mike. The kids love him. He'll bring in millions for King Creole. Their voices, slick with optimism and dollar signs, echoed in his mind. King Creole wasn't just another film. It was a gritty, dramatic piece set in the vibrant, dangerous streets of New Orleans. It needed a leading man who could convey vulnerability, anger, ambition, and a kind of desperate charm. It needed an actor, not a musical act. Curtiz had envisioned someone like James Dean, a natural, raw talent who could truly inhabit a character. But Dean was gone, and the studio had decided that Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was the next best thing. Curtiz snorted, blowing a plume of smoke towards the ceiling. He was being strong, armed, plain and simple. His assistant, a perpetually flustered young woman named Sylvia, knocked softly and then peered in. "Mr. Curtiz, Mr. Wallace is on the line. He says it's urgent." Hal Wallace, the producer, was the main advocate for Presley. Curtiz sighed, stubbing out his cigar with a decisive twist. "Put him through, Sylvia." He picked up the heavy black receiver. "Wallace," he barked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Michael, good to hear your voice. Are we set for Presley's screen test tomorrow?" Wallace's voice was smooth, confident. "Screen test?" Curtiz scoffed. "More like a formality. You've already cast him, haven't you?" Wallace chuckled, a sound that always grated on Curtiz's nerves. "Now, Michael, you know we value your artistic input, but the momentum is with us on this one. He's already done Jailhouse Rockin', Loving You. He's got a following, and he wants this role. Truly, he's been studying. This isn't a musical, Hal. This is a drama. This is about a boy, Danny Fisher, who gets pulled into the criminal underworld. It's dark. It's complex. Can your king do that? He has a certain raw intensity, Michael. You'll see it. Plus, we can weave in a few musical numbers. Keep his fans happy." "Musical numbers," Curtiz repeated, his voice laced with disdain. "Every time I turn around, you want to put a song in it. It dilutes the story. It makes a mockery of the drama." He knew it was a losing battle. The studio needed the commercial success, and Presley was the key. Charisma, sure sex appeal undeniably. But did it translate into a nuanced performance? Could this king convey the internal turmoil of a young man caught between good and evil? Could he make audiences feel for Danny Fisher? He picked up one of the photographs, a mischievous glint in his eyes. There was a confidence there, an almost arrogant swagger, but also something else, something hidden beneath the surface. A flicker of vulnerability, perhaps. Curtiz dismissed the thought. He was imagining things. He'd set up a scene from the script, a difficult one, where Danny Fisher confronts his estranged father. It would require emotional depth, anger, pain, and a touch of desperation. If Presley could pull that off truly, pull it off then, maybe, just maybe Curtiz would consider him. But he doubted it. He expected a stiff, self-conscious performance, a singer trying to act rather than an actor becoming the character. The prospect of working with such a raw, unproven talent, especially one with such a massive, distracting public image, filled him with a professional dread. He thrived on control, on precision. Presley seemed like a force of nature, untamed and unpredictable. How could he mold that? How could he bend it to his will, to the vision of King Creole? He stood up, walking to the window. The Hollywood hills were shrouded in a faint smog. The iconic sign, a distant white beacon. Millions of dreams had been made and shattered in this town. He wondered if Elvis Presley's dream of becoming a serious actor would be one of them. And he wondered if he, Michael Curtiz, would be the one to shatter it. Or worse, compromise his artistic integrity by trying to salvage it. No, he decided. He wouldn't compromise. He would demand excellence. And if Presley couldn't deliver, he would fight the studio, even if it meant delaying the production. He was Michael Curtiz. He didn't make bad films. And he certainly didn't make films with glorified pop stars. Who couldn't act. The thought hardened his resolve. He would be stern. He would be demanding. He would see what this king was truly made of. And if it wasn't enough, he would send him back to his concerts, back to his screaming fans, and find an actual actor for his film. The stage was set for a confrontation, and Curtiz, the seasoned veteran, felt ready for battle. The next morning, the sound stage felt colder than usual. Michael Curtiz, dressed in his usual crisp shirt and tie, stood by the camera, his arms crossed, a critical eye sweeping over the makeshift set. It was simple. A kitchen table, 2 chairs, and a window looking out onto a painted backdrop of a New Orleans street. The scene for the screen test was from early in the script, a tense exchange between Danny Fisher and his disheartened father. Elvis Presley arrived promptly at 9, accompanied by a small entourage, looking like a stout, shrewd carnival barker, and a couple of young men who looked more like bodyguards than assistants. Elvis himself, however, walked in quietly. He wasn't wearing his usual flamboyant stage attire. Instead, he was in a simple pair of slacks, a collared shirt, and a sport coat. His hair was still the iconic pompadour, but it seemed a little less, wild-combed neatly. Curtiz observed him as he entered. The young man seemed taller in person and surprisingly lean. His eyes, a striking blue, darted around the set, taking everything in. There was a slight nervousness in his posture, a barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. Good nerve could be channeled, or they could freeze him up completely. "Mr. Presley?" Curtiz said, his voice flat, professional. He offered no handshake. Elvis turned, his expression shifting from curiosity to a polite, almost deferential respect. "Mr. Curtiz, it's an honor to meet you, sir." His voice was softer than Curtiz expected, with a distinct, gentle southern drawl, not the booming, confident voice of a rock and roll star. "We are here to test your acting abilities, Mr. Presley, not your singing ones," Curtiz stated, cutting straight to the chase. "Do you know the scene?" Elvis nodded. "Yes, sir. I've read it a few times." He held a copy of the script, its pages dog-eared. "Good. We will run it once through, then we will refine. This scene requires you to be angry, frustrated, but also deeply hurt. Your father has failed you. You are at a crossroads. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I think so." Elvis swallowed, his gaze. Curtiz introduced him to the actor playing his father, a seasoned character actor named Frank Conroy. Conroy offered a warm smile, but Curtiz noticed Elvis seemed a little overwhelmed, almost shy. This wasn't the swaggering performer who could command thousands. This was a young man clearly out of his element. "All right," Curtiz announced, clapping his hands. "Let's begin. Action." Elvis launched into the lines. He spoke them clearly, but the words felt recited, not truly felt. His body was stiff, his gestures tentative. He kept his eyes fixed on Conroy, but there was no real connection, no spark of genuine emotion. It was as if he was playing the idea of angry and hurt, rather than being it. Curtiz watched his frown deepening. Just as he expected, a singer trying to act. No natural instinct, no emotional depth. Cut. Curtiz barked, his voice echoing in the quiet studio. He walked towards Elvis, his footsteps sharp and deliberate. "Mr. Presley, you are speaking the words. You are not feeling them. Your character, Danny, is desperate. He is at the end of his rope. Where is that desperation? Where is the fire?" Elvis's cheeks flushed. Trying is not enough. This is not a song where you can simply hit the notes. This is a life. You must live it. Imagine you are Danny. Your father has taken everything from you. He has broken his promises. He has disappointed you. He seemed to be genuinely thinking, trying to process Curtiz's words. Anger, sir, and sadness-like. He just doesn't understand. Show me that. Don't just tell me. Show me with your eyes, with your body. Let it explode. Curtiz's voice grew louder, more insistent. He was pushing, testing. He wanted to see if this young man had any fight in him, any raw, untapped emotion that he could pull from. They tried the scene again. This time Elvis was slightly better. A flicker of genuine frustration crossed his face, a slight tremble in his voice. But it was still largely an imitation. King was still trapped behind a facade, unable to truly let go and embody the vulnerability and rage of Danny Fisher. No, no, no. Curtiz stopped him again. You are holding back, Mr. Presley. Let it go. You must be brave enough to be ugly, to be flawed. Danny is not a perfect hero. He is a boy struggling to survive. This is not a dance routine. This is life. Elvis's shoulders slumped a little. He was clearly feeling the pressure, the weight of Curtiz's expectations. And perhaps his own self-consciousness. He was used to adulation, not such direct, unsparing criticism. Take 5 minutes, Curtiz said, turning away in frustration. He walked back to the camera, rubbing his temples. He knew he was being harsh, but he had to be. He needed to break through whatever wall Elvis had built around himself. If there was anything there, Curtiz would find it. If not, then this whole endeavor was a colossal waste of time. He watched Elvis talk quietly with Colonel Parker, who seemed to be offering words of encouragement, patting him on the shoulder. Elvis nodded, but his eyes were still troubled. Granny, time to try again. Elvis took a deep breath. Curtiz called a tection, if only slightly. Elvis's voice cracked on one of the lines, a real tremor of emotion, not an acted one. His eyes, when they met Conroy's, held a flicker of genuine anguish. It wasn't perfect, far from it. He still held back too much, still seemed to be trying to control the performance rather than letting the character take over. But it was there, a brief raw glimpse of something authentic. Curtiz didn't outwardly react, but an almost imperceptible spark ignited in his mind. He'd seen it. Not the polished, professional acting he was used to, but a raw, unrefined emotional response. Like a vein of gold shimmering deep within the earth, almost unreachable, but definitely present. It was frustrating. He wanted to pull it out, to force alone. This wasn't just about yelling louder. It was about finding a way to tap into that raw nerve. "Better, Mr. Presley," he said, his voice still firm, but with a hint of something less dismissive. Still not enough, but better. He saw the immediate relief on Elvis's face, a slight lifting of the tension. The boy was trying, he truly was. And in that brief, almost accidental moment of vulnerability, Michael Curtiz saw the first faint glimmer of what Wallace had been talking about. It wasn't polish or text that something could be owned. The challenge was immense, but for the first time Curtiz felt a flicker of intrigue rather than just irritation. This was going to be difficult, but perhaps not entirely pointless after all. The first few days of actual filming for King Creole were for Michael Curtiz a test of patience, Elvis was eager, that much was clear. He arrived on time, listened intently, and tried his best to follow instructions. But his movements were often stiff, his lines delivered with an almost rehearsed quality that stripped them of authenticity. He was playing Elvis Presley, acting rather than becoming Danny Fisher Curtiz. True to his reputation, was relentless. He pushed, he cajoled, he sometimes roared. More fire, Presley, more pain. You're not posing for a picture, you're living this. Feel it in your gut. Elvis would flinch, his eyes clouded with frustration, but he never talked back. He'd nod, take a deep breath, and try again and again and again. Curtiz noticed that, unlike some temperamental actors he'd worked with, Elvis didn't storm off, didn't throw a fit. He just kept trying. There was a quiet determination beneath the famous persona. One afternoon during a break, Curtiz found himself observing Elvis from a distance. The crew was resetting a complex camera shot, and most of the actors were taking a breather. Elvis wasn't in his dressing room, wasn't surrounded by his usual crowd. He was sitting alone on a wooden apple box at the edge of the set. A crumpled script in his hands, his shoulders were slumped, his head bowed. He looked small and surprisingly vulnerable. He wasn't the king of the stage now. He was just a young man, clearly struggling, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer demand of what Curtiz was asking of him. Curtiz, against his usual habit of maintaining a strict professional distance, found himself walking towards him. He stopped a few feet away, casting a long shadow over the apple box. Elvis looked up, startled. His eyes were tired. "Mr. Curtiz, sir. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Presley Curtiz grunted, not unkindly. Elvis offered a weak smile. "Just trying to get it right. I really want to do a good job for you, sir." Curtiz sat down on another apple box nearby. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the crew. "You're trying too hard," Curtiz finally said. "You're thinking too much. Acting, Mr. Presley, is not about feeling." Elvis looked at him, his brow furrowed. "But how do you just feel it like, on command?" Curtiz pulled a cigar from his pocket but didn't light it. He twirled it between his fingers. "Every person has a well inside them, Presley. A well of experience, of emotion, of joy, of sorrow, of anger. Danny Fisher, he has a well of his own. You must find the common ground. You must find." Elvis listened intently, his blue eyes fixed on Curtiz's face. He wasn't staring with awe or fear, but with genuine curiosity. "Have you ever been hurt, Presley? Truly hurt, betrayed, left with nothing?" Elvis looked away, his gaze distant. A flicker of something real crossed his face, a raw memory. "Yes, sir," he said softly. "Growing up, there wasn't much. My family, we struggled, and sometimes folks can be real unkind. Especially when you're different. And when you're on stage," Curtiz continued, pressing gently, "when you sing those songs, where does that power come from? The way you move, the way you connect with those people." Elvis paused, thinking deeply. "Just comes out, sir, like it's inside me, bursting to get out the music. It just takes over." "Exactly," Curtiz exclaimed, a rare animation in his voice. He pointed the cigar at Elvis. That is what I want. The same power you find in your music, the same raw emotion. You must find for Danny Fisher. Don't act it, let it take over. Let Danny Fisher come bursting out of you just like your music does." He seemed to be truly grasping the concept, a light dawning in his eyes. He'd been trying to perform the character, to put on an act. Curtiz was telling him to become the character, to let his own experience, his own feelings fuel the performance. "You have a natural charisma, Presley," Curtiz said, a slight softening in his voice. "Anyone can see that, but charisma alone does not make an actor. The nobility, rawness, the courage to expose yourself, that makes an actor." He stood up. "Think about it when we shoot the next scene. Don't think about the camera. Don't think about me. Think about Danny. Think about what he feels. Let it rise. Curtiz walked away, leaving Elvis sitting there, deep in thought. He didn't know if the words had truly sunk in, or if it was just a fleeting moment of understanding, but he felt a flicker of hope. He had seen the raw material that something Wallace kept talking about. It wasn't polished. It was rough, but it was potent. Later that afternoon, they began filming a scene where Danny Fisher, alone and frustrated, smashes a guitar in a fit of rage. Curtiz set up the shot, barked his instructions, and then, remembering their earlier conversation, simply said, "Action. Presley, let it go." Elvis started the scene. He picked up the cheap prop guitar. His face was contorted not in a staged way, but with genuine, raw frustration. His eyes, usually so guarded, were wide, reflecting a deep, almost desperate anger. He didn't just smash the guitar, he attacked it, his body trembling with the effort. Each blow fueled by a primal scream of rage that never quite left his lips, but resonated in the violence of his actions. He threw the pieces down, his chest heaving, his face red, tears brimming in his eyes. When Curtiz finally called "cut," the silence on the set was profound. The crew, usually bustling, was still. They had just witnessed something powerful, something unexpected. Elvis stood there breathing heavily, looking utterly spent, as if he had run a marathon. He looked at Curtiz, his eyes still shining with residual emotion, a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. Curtiz walked slowly towards him. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the young man, really looked at him. The king was gone. In his place was Danny Fisher, raw and real and hurting. "That," Curtiz said, his voice low, steady, "was acting, Mr. Presley. That was feeling, that was what I was talking about." A slow smile spread across Elvis's face, a genuine, unguarded smile of relief and pride. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, almost hoarsely. "Thank you." Curtiz nodded, a rare, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He still had a long way to go, but in that moment, Michael Curtiz saw the spark. He saw the potential. He saw the something special that could be molded, shaped, and unleashed. And for the first time since this project began, he felt a genuine flicker of excitement, not just dread. He wasn't just directing a movie anymore. He was guiding a transformation. After the breakthrough with the guitar-smashing scene, the atmosphere on the set of King Creole began to shift. Michael Curtiz's criticism of Elvis didn't disappear. He was still demanding, still a stickler for perfection, but his tone became different. There was less exasperation, more focused guidance. He no longer treated Elvis as a pop star dabbling in acting, but as a genuine, albeit raw, talent. Elvis, in turn, seemed to shed some of his earlier shyness and self-consciousness. He was still respectful, calling Curtiz sir and listening intently, but he approached his scenes with a new confidence, a willingness to experiment, to push himself. He began to ask questions, thoughtful questions, about Danny Fisher's motivations, about the emotional arc of a scene. Curtiz found himself spending more time with Elvis, not just during takes, but between them. He'd pull up a chair or lean against a prop and talk through a scene, not just giving directions, but discussing the underlying emotions, the subtext. He'd tell Elvis stories about other actors, about how they found their characters, about the importance of authenticity. An actor, Curtiz explained one afternoon, demonstrating with his hands, is like a sculptor. You are given a block of marble, the character, the script, but inside that marble, the statue already exists. Your job is to chip away, absorbing every word. "So I gotta chip away the Elvis part, and just leave Danny Curtiz," grunted a rare, almost smile playing on his lips. "Precisely. The audience doesn't want to see Elvis Presley acting. They want to see Danny Fisher living." He noticed Elvis would often be seen off to the side, not surrounded by his usual entourage, but alone, his script open, his lips moving as he rehearsed lines, his hands gesturing as he worked through a scene. He was doing his homework, deeply immersed in the character. One day they were filming a scene where Danny Fisher has to sing in a smoky club, his voice laced with the weariness and despair of his circumstances. Elvis, of course, was a singer, and his voice was incredible. But Curtiz wanted something more than just a powerful vocal performance. He wanted the song to tell a story, to convey Danny's inner turmoil. They did a take. Elvis sang beautifully, his voice soaring. But Curtiz wasn't satisfied. "Cut," he called. Elvis looked thoughtful. "So not like a show? Then more like a prayer?" Curtiz's eyes widened slightly. That was a surprisingly perceptive insight. "Yes," he said, a genuine note of approval in his voice. "Like a prayer or a cry from the soul." Elvis took a moment, closing his eyes, seeming to gather himself. When the music started again, and he began to sing, his voice was still powerful, but there was a new rawness to it, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. His eyes seemed distant, filled with unspoken pain, yet clinging to a sliver of hope. It was no longer a performance, it was an outpouring. When the song ended, the set was silent. Curtiz let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, savoring the emotional resonance. He then walked towards Elvis, a rare, almost gentle expression on his face. "That," Curtiz said, his voice quiet, "was outstanding, Presley, truly outstanding." Elvis looked surprised, then a wide, genuine smile broke across his face. It was a smile that lit up the entire set, a boyish, unburdened joy that revealed the simple, earnest heart beneath the star persona. "Thank you, sir," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. Curtiz found himself feeling a strange sense of satisfaction, a paternal pride that surprised him. He had always been a taskmaster focused on the end product, the perfect shot. But with Elvis, he was witnessing something more profound, a blossoming, a transformation. He was seeing a young man discover a depth within himself he hadn't known existed. Later that week, during a particularly grueling night, shoot in a mock New Orleans alleyway, he kept missing his marks. Stumbling over lines, Curtiz saw him getting frustrated with himself. Instead of yelling, Curtiz called a quick break. He pulled Elvis aside, away from the glare of the lights and the watchful eyes of the crew. "Presley," he said, his voice low and calm, "you are exhausted. I see it. But Danny Fisher, he is also exhausted. He is running on fumes. Use that. Don't fight it. Let it feed your performance." Elvis looked at him, surprised and be strong. "No," Curtiz replied, shaking his head. "Sometimes the greatest strength is in showing your weakness. The audience connects to that. They see themselves in the struggle." He gave Elvis a rare, quick pat on the shoulder. "Now, go get some coffee. Then we will try again. And this time, let the weariness be Danny's weariness." When they resumed the scene, Elvis was still tired, but his performance was infused with a new, authentic exhaustion. His movements were heavier, his voice rougher, his eyes dark with the strain of a character at the end of his tether. It was powerful. It was real. The cast and crew were beginning to notice the change in Elvis and the change in Curtiz's approach. The strict, unyielding director was still there, but beneath the gruff exterior, a quiet mentorship was forming. Curtiz was no longer just directing scenes. He was directing a person, guiding a soul towards an artistic awakening. And Elvis, with his immense talent and his genuine desire to learn, was proving to be a most remarkable student. The studio had sent him a pop star. Curtiz was beginning to forge an actor. As the filming of King Creole progressed, the professional dynamic between Michael Curtiz and Elvis Presley deepened, blossoming into something akin to a mentorship. Yet, beneath the stern direction and earnest efforts, something else began to emerge. A quiet, unexpected personal connection. It started subtly. Curtiz, known for his relentless focus on the work, would occasionally ask Elvis about his life outside of the studio. Not in a gossipy way, but with a genuine, almost paternal curiosity. One day, during a lunch break, Curtiz found Elvis sitting alone, sketching in a small notebook. Curtiz walked over, intrigued. "What's that, Presley?" Elvis looked up, a faint flush on his cheeks. "Just some doodles, sir, nothing much. I used to draw a lot when I was a kid." He showed Curtiz a sketch of a guitar, detailed and beautifully rendered. Curtiz, who appreciated all forms of artistic expression, nodded in approval. Talent, it seems, extends beyond the voice and hips. He said it with a rare, dry wit that made Elvis chuckle. "My mama always encouraged me," Elvis said, his voice softening. "She believed in me, even when no one else did." Curtiz sat down opposite him. "My mother, too. She always told me, 'Michael, you have a vision. Do not let anyone compromise it.'" He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "It's a powerful thing, that kind of belief." Elvis nodded slowly. Another time, Curtiz overheard Elvis humming a gospel tune between takes. Curtiz, who had a surprising appreciation for diverse musical forms, stopped him. "What was that melody, Presley? It's haunting." Elvis smiled. "Oh, that's just an old gospel hymn. My family, we sang a lot of gospel. It's where I first learned to sing, really." He then, unprompted, started to sing a verse, his voice low and rich, filling the quiet sound stage with a raw spiritual beauty. Curtiz closed his eyes, listening. He wasn't thinking of rock and roll now, or screaming fans. He was listening to a pure, unadorned voice, full of soul and genuine feeling. "Remarkable," he said when Elvis finished. "Truly remarkable. There is a purity there, that it transcends performance. It is a part of you." "Yes, yes, sir," Elvis replied, a warmth in his eyes. "It's from my roots, where I come from." Curtiz, a man who rarely spoke of his own past, found himself sharing snippets of his journey from Hungary to Hollywood. The struggles, the triumphs, the relentless pursuit of his vision. He talked about the craft of filmmaking. Not just the technical aspects, but the emotional core. The way a story could touch a million hearts. Elvis listened with rapt attention, asking itchival questions that showed he wasn't just hearing words, but truly understanding the passion behind them. These small shared moments, away from the pressure of the cameras, began to build a bridge between them. Curtiz started to see beyond the king of rock and roll and into the earnest, talented young man from Tupelo, Mississippi. He saw Elvis's humility, his surprising sensitivity, his deep desire to be more than just a fleeting phenomenon. He saw the kindness in his eyes, the loyalty he felt for his family and friends. And Elvis, in turn, began to see Michael Curtiz, not just as the gruff legendary director, but as a mentor who genuinely cared about his growth. A demanding but ultimately fair guide who saw potential where others saw only spectacle. He learned that beneath Curtiz's tough exterior was a profound artistic sensibility and a deep respect for craft. One evening, after a particularly challenging scene that Elvis had finally nailed on the 10th take, Curtiz found him wiping sweat from his brow, looking utterly exhausted. "You pushed yourself, Presley," Curtiz said, walking up to him. "And it paid off. That was excellent work." Elvis looked at him, his smile weary but bright. "Only because you pushed me, sir. I didn't think I had that in me." Curtiz gave him a rare, almost paternal pat on the shoulder. "You have more in you than you know, young man. Far more. Don't ever forget that." He saw the genuine gratitude in Elvis's eyes, the profound appreciation for the recognition. It wasn't just about the praise for a good take, it was about the acknowledgement of his effort, his growth, his burgeoning talent. The film set, once a place of tension and doubt, now hummed with a different energy. Elvis was thriving under Curtiz's tutelage. Gaining confidence with each passing day, he was no longer just reciting lines. He was embodying Danny Fisher, infusing the character with his own unique blend of vulnerability and raw power. Curtiz, watching him transform, found a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just making another film. He was helping to unleash a new kind of star, one who could not only captivate with a song but also move with a performance. He was witnessing firsthand the emergence of the something special that had been whispered about, and he was proud to be the one to help bring it to light. The demanding director had found a protege, and in doing so had found a new, unexpected warmth in his own gruff heart. Just as Elvis found his stride on the King Creole set, external pressures began to mount. The relentless demands of his music career, recording sessions, promotional appearances. The ever-present media started to clash with the rigorous filming schedule. The studio, always keen to capitalize on his immense popularity, wanted him everywhere at once. One particularly grueling week, Elvis was scheduled for an important recording session in the evenings, meaning he'd arrive on set exhausted for his morning scenes with Curtiz. His energy flagged, and some of the newfound depth he'd been channeling began to wane. He looked tired, his eyes often heavy with lack of sleep. Curtiz noticed immediately. His keen eye missed nothing. He saw the struggle etched on Elvis's face, the slight hesitation in his delivery, the moments when his focus drifted. He knew it wasn't a lack of effort, but sheer physical and mental depletion. During a particularly difficult scene involving a tense confrontation, his anger needed to explode, but Elvis's energy simply wasn't there. He delivered the lines, but the fire was missing. Cut. Curtiz's voice was sharp but not angry. He walked over to Elvis. Presley, you are not here. Your mind is somewhere else. What is going on? Elvis sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, sir. Just a lot of late nights, recording sessions, you know. And the studio wants me to fly to New York for a press junket this weekend. Curtiz's jaw tightened. A press junket while we are in the middle of principal photography? This is unacceptable. He turned to Colonel Parker, who was hovering nearby. Colonel, your client is an actor on my set. His priority must be this film. Colonel Parker, ever the businessman, gave a placating smile. Now, Mr. Curtiz, you understand Elvis has other commitments. His fans, the record sales. Nonsense, Curtiz thundered, abandoning his usual restraint. You are jeopardizing his performance. You are jeopardizing this film. Do you want a great film or a tired pop star trying to act? Turned back to Elvis, his voice softening slightly, but still firm. Presley, you have made incredible progress. You are becoming Danny Fisher. Do not let these outside distractions pull you away from that. This is your chance to prove you are more than a singer. You must commit fully. Elvis looked from Curtiz to Parker, a conflict clearly raging within him. He was loyal to Parker, who had made him a star, but he was also deeply invested in King Creole and his growth as an actor under Curtiz. Colonel Elvis said, his voice surprisingly steady. Mr. Curtiz is right. I need to focus on this. Can we reschedule the junket? Parker's face reddened. Reschedule Elvis. This is a major promotional opportunity. Curtiz stepped in, his voice calm but authoritative. Colonel, you will make the necessary arrangements. Elvis Presley is exhausted. He will not be flying anywhere this weekend, except perhaps to his bed for some much-needed rest. We need him fresh and focused on Monday. Parker, seeing Curtiz's absolute resolve and Elvis's quiet determination, knew he was beaten. He grumbled but finally conceded. Very well, Mr. Curtiz, I'll see what I can do. Later that day, Curtiz spoke privately with Elvis. Presley, he said, you must learn to protect your instrument, not just your voice, but your mind, your body, your emotions. They are all vital to your work here. Elvis nodded. Everyone wants a piece of me. Then you must learn to say no, Curtiz advised. A rare piece of personal wisdom. Or find people who will say it for you. You have a gift. Do not let others exploit it to your detriment. The following week, with the press junket canceled and his schedule slightly less demanding, Elvis returned to the set revitalized. The spark was back in his eyes, the fire in his performance. He nailed the difficult confrontation scene that had troubled him, bringing an intense, raw emotion to Danny's anger and frustration. Curtiz watched him, a sense of quiet triumph in his heart. Elvis had chosen the path of the artist over the path of pure commerce, at least for that moment. He had trusted Curtiz, had seen the value in Curtiz's insistence on protecting his artistic focus. The challenges didn't stop there. There were always technical issues demanding night shoots, the pressure of a looming deadline. But with each obstacle, Elvis seemed to grow stronger, more resilient. He learned to manage his energy, to immerse himself more deeply in the character, to draw on his own inner reserves. He showed true grit, a tenacity that surprised even Curtiz. One afternoon, a major news story broke about Elvis's personal life, causing a frenzy of tabloid interest. The studio was worried. It would distract him, but Curtiz, seeing the quiet determination in Elvis's eyes, simply went to him. "Presley," he said, "the world outside is noisy. Let it be noisy in here." He tapped his chest. "It must be quiet. Focus on Danny. Let Danny be your shield against the noise." Elvis nodded, took a deep breath, and walked onto the set. And for the rest of the day, despite the swirling controversy outside, he delivered one of his most focused, powerful performances. Yet, Curtiz, watching him, felt a profound sense of respect. This young man, who had seemed so raw and unformed just weeks ago, was not only learning to act, but learning to navigate the intense pressures of his unprecedented fame. He was becoming not just an actor, but a man of considerable strength and character. The something special Curtiz had glimpsed was proving to be far more substantial than mere charisma. It was an inner fortitude, a deep well of resilience that would serve him and his art for years to come. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the transformation of Elvis Presley into Danny Fisher became more complete. The raw potential Michael Curtiz had identified was now visibly blossoming layer by layer, revealing a natural, intuitive actor. Elvis no longer seemed self-conscious in front of the camera. He moved with a newfound fluidity, his gestures becoming extensions of Danny's thoughts and emotions. His voice, once occasionally stiff, now modulated effortlessly, shifting from a boyish plea to a simmering rage, from a tender whisper to a desperate shout. He was no longer trying to remember his lines, he was living them. Curtiz, ever the perfectionist, still pushed him, but the nature of his direction had changed. Instead of teaching basic technique, he was now refining nuances, asking for deeper emotional shades, challenging Elvis to explore the furthest reaches of Danny's complex character. "Presley," Curtiz would say, "in this scene, Danny is not just sad. He is disillusioned. He has lost faith in the very people he trusted. Show me that disillusionment. Show me the weariness of a young man whose dreams are dying." And Elvis would respond, his eyes taking on a haunted, weary look that was truly heartbreaking. He understood. He felt it. He was becoming Danny. The change was evident not just to Curtiz, but to everyone on set. The veteran character actors, initially skeptical of working with a pop star, now watched Elvis with genuine admiration. Carolyn Jones, who played Ronnie the cynical but kind-hearted singer, found a natural chemistry with him. She often spoke highly of his responsiveness and his willingness to truly listen in a scene. "He's like a sponge," she remarked to Curtiz one day during a break. "He just soaks it all in and then he gives it back. But it's his own, it's real." Even the crew, initially prone to celebrity gawking, now treated Elvis as one of their own, respecting his dedication. They saw him working tirelessly, often staying late to discuss scenes with Curtiz, or practicing his guitar for a musical number, making sure the movements were authentic to Danny, not just to Elvis. One particular scene stood out for Curtiz. It was a pivotal moment where Danny, having been pushed too far, finally lashes of suppressed anger and resentment, finally erupting. It was a long, emotionally draining monologue. Curtiz set up the shot tight on Elvis's face. This is it. Every frustration, every disappointment, every broken promise, it all comes out here. Let it rip. Don't hold back. Let Danny explode. Elvis nodded, his eyes already distant, inhabiting the space of Danny's pain. When Curtiz called action, Elvis began to speak, a tremor of contained rage, then building, gathering momentum, until he was practically screaming, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking with the force of his emotions. He wasn't just angry, he was broken, desperate, and utterly exposed. The set was silent, save for Elvis's voice. Finally, Curtiz lowered his megaphone. "Cut," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Print that." No one moved for a moment. Then a spontaneous, quiet round of applause rippled through the crew. It wasn't a boisterous applause for a completed scene, but a heartfelt acknowledgement of a truly exceptional performance. Elvis looked up, his face still streaked with tears, a bewildered but deeply satisfied expression on his face. He seemed almost surprised by the depth of emotion he had just unearthed. Curtiz walked towards him, his face unreadable, then reached out and for the first time clapped Elvis firmly on the back. It was a gesture of profound respect, of unspoken admiration. "Presley," Curtiz said, his voice gruff with emotion. "He rarely showed. You found him. You truly found Danny Fisher. That was magnificent." Elvis looked at him, his blue eyes shimmering, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice still hoarse. "Thank you for showing me how." Curtiz just nodded affirmation with his own eyes. The singer had shed his skin, and in his place a true actor had emerged. The something special was no longer a glimmer, it was a blazing flame, ready to light up the screen. Michael Curtiz, the demanding director, had not just filmed a movie. He had midwifed the birth of a serious dramatic talent, a talent he now knew would change the landscape of Hollywood. The transformation complete, the special something that Michael Curtiz had initially doubted and then cautiously hoped for, now blazed forth from Elvis Presley in almost every frame. It wasn't just his newfound acting skill. It was an innate, magnetic quality that elevated his performance beyond mere technique. This something was hard to define but easy to recognize. It was a raw vulnerability that Elvis wasn't afraid to show, an emotional honesty that ripped through the screen. It was the way his eyes, usually so guarded, could suddenly convey a universe of pain or longing with just a flicker. It was the unexpected tenderness he brought to scenes of connection, and the furious, untamed energy he unleashed in moments of rage. Curtiz found himself often simply letting the camera roll, trusting Elvis's instincts. He would set up a scene, give minimal direction, and then watch in awe as Elvis inhabited Danny Fisher completely, bringing nuances and layers that weren't explicitly written in the script. There was a scene where Danny Fisher, alone in his room, is practicing his guitar. Lost in thought, it was meant to be a quiet, reflective moment. Curtiz expected a simple portrayal of a young man with a guitar, but Elvis, without Curtiz saying a word, imbued it with such profound loneliness, such a longing for a different life. He strummed the guitar softly, then stopped, his fingers hovering over the strings, his gaze distant, lost in a world of unspoken dreams and anxieties. He wasn't just playing a character, he was being him. "That's it, Presley," Curtiz whispered from behind the camera, almost to himself. "That's it." Another time, during a tense interaction with a villain, Danny has to stand his ground, projecting strength despite his fear. Elvis played it perfectly, his jaw set, his eyes narrowed. But then, as the villain turned away, Curtiz saw a subtle, almost imperceptible tremble in Elvis's hand. A quick, furtive glance of fear across his face, before he quickly regained his composure. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes about Danny's true feelings, the raw courage it took him to stand up. Curtiz knew that was not something he could have directed. That was pure instinct, a deep understanding of the character's internal conflict. That was the something special. He remembered a conversation with Hal Wallace. Early on, Wallace saying, "He has something. I've seen it." At the time, Curtiz had dismissed it as producer speak for box office appeal. Now he understood. It was an undefinable magic, a natural screen presence that few actors possessed, especially so early in their careers. Elvis wasn't just memorizing lines. He was truly listening to the other actors in a scene, reacting organically, letting their performances influence his own. His eyes would follow their movements, his face subtly mirroring their expressions, creating a dynamic, living interaction. One particularly demanding scene involved Annie being beaten in an alleyway. Curtiz, always concerned with realism, had prepared the stunt coordinator carefully. But when Elvis performed it, he didn't just play the physical pain. He conveyed the humiliation, the desperation, the raw primal fear of a young man stripped of his dignity. He thrashed. Not like an actor pretending, but like a real person fighting for his life. His body contorted in genuine agony. It was visceral, almost unbearable to watch. When Curtiz called, "Cut!" the entire crew applauded, not for the stunt, but for the raw, gut-wrenching emotion Elvis had delivered. Elvis lay there for a moment completely spent, then slowly rose, his face pale, but with a look of intense satisfaction. Curtiz walked over, his face solemn. "Presley," he said, his voice low, "that was an incredible performance. You truly went there." Elvis nodded, still catching his breath. "Felt like I was there, sir." Curtiz understood. That was the true mark of an actor, blurring the line between self and character. He knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that King Creole would not just be another successful film in his career. It would be a defining moment for Elvis Presley. It would be the film that showcased his dramatic range, his profound ability to connect with an audience on an emotional level, far beyond his music. The something special was not a trick or a gimmick. It was an inherent talent, a wellspring of emotion and charisma that Curtiz had helped to unlock. He had guided Elvis, pushed him, sometimes even broken him down, but always with the unwavering belief that this raw diamond could be polished into a brilliant gem. And now, watching Elvis move through the final scenes, embodying Danny Fisher with such conviction and grace, Curtiz felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had been right to trust his instincts, and Elvis Presley, the singer, was about to become Elvis Presley, the actor. The last days of filming King Creole were imbued with a bittersweet atmosphere. The grueling schedule was coming to an end. The characters were nearly brought to life, and the intense creative bond formed between Michael Curtiz and Elvis Presley was approaching its natural conclusion. Curtiz, ever the taskmaster, remained focused on every detail, ensuring each shot was perfect, each line delivered with precision. But there was a different energy now. A quiet understanding and mutual respect that permeated the set. Elvis, confident in his abilities and trusting in Curtiz's vision, approached the final scenes with a newfound mastery. They filmed the very last scene on a quiet afternoon. It was a poignant moment, a reflection of Danny Fisher's journey, tinged with hope, but also the scars of his past. Elvis delivered the lines with a quiet power, his eyes conveying years of experience packed into a young man's face. There was a maturity in his performance that hadn't existed at the beginning of production. When Curtiz finally called, "Cut! That's a wrap on King Creole," the cheer from the crew was immense. A mixture of relief, exhaustion, and exhilaration filled the soundstage. People hugged, clapped, and slapped each other on the back. Elvis stood for a moment, absorbing the finality of it. He looked around the set that had been his world for months, the place where he had pushed himself further than he ever imagined. Then his gaze settled on Michael Curtiz. Curtiz, usually stoic and reserved, allowed a rare smile to touch his lips. He walked towards Elvis, the bustling crowned him. "Presley," Curtiz said, his voice surprisingly soft, "you did it, you truly did it." Elvis's eyes were shining. "Only because you showed me how, sir. You believed in me." Curtiz paused, looking deep into Elvis's eyes. "No, young man. I merely helped you find what was already within you. You have a profound gift. Do not waste it. This is just the beginning for you, if you choose it." It was the highest praise Curtiz could offer, a direct acknowledgement of Elvis's innate talent. Not just his learned skills Elvis typically composed, felt a lump form in his throat. He reached out his hand and Curtiz, without hesitation, took it, shaking it firmly. It was more than a handshake. It was a handshake of respect, of shared accomplishment, of a bond forged in the fires of artistic endeavor. "Thank you, Mr. Curtiz," Elvis said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything, for your patience, for pushing me, for seeing something in me." Curtiz merely nodded. Then, to everyone's surprise, he gave Elvis another pat on the shoulder, a gesture that by now had become almost affectionate. "Go home, Presley. Get some rest. You've earned it." As Elvis walked off the set, surrounded by his grateful entourage, Curtiz watched him go. He saw not just a pop star, but a genuine artist, a young man with a spirit and talent that could move mountains. He felt a profound sense of satisfaction. He had taken a gamble, had fought the studio, and had been rewarded with a performance that transcended all expectations. Later that evening, Curtiz was back in his office, the silence profound now that the set was shut down. He sat at his desk, a single lamp illuminating the scattered production notes. He picked up one of the early photographs of Elvis, the one he had poked with his cigar on that first day, filled with skepticism. He looked at the confident, almost defiant gaze in the picture. He remembered his initial doubts, his fear that this would be a commercial stunt, a compromise to his artistic integrity. He remembered the struggle, the frustration, the moments of near despair. But then he remembered the breakthrough. The raw emotion in the guitar-smashing scene, the vulnerability in his singing, the quiet determination in his eyes, the deep understanding of Danny's pain. He remembered the feeling of witnessing something truly special emerge, like watching a chrysalis transform. Put the photograph down, a contented sigh escaping his lips. He hadn't just directed a film. He had, in a way, helped birth an actor. He had seen the potential for dramatic depth in a young man known only for his musical prowess, and he had nurtured it, guided it, and ultimately helped it shine. The something special was real, and it was glorious. He knew King Creole would be more than just a hit. It would be a testament to a young star's hidden talent and a director's unwavering belief. Months later, the premiere of King Creole arrived. The Pantages Theater in Hollywood buzzed with anticipation. Limousines lined the streets, flashbulbs popped, and the roar of the crowd, especially the fervent screams for Elvis, was deafening. Michael Curtiz stood in the lobby, a rare nervous tremor in his usually steady hands. He was proud of the film, no doubt, but the reception was always the true test. Would the critics understand? Would the audience embrace Elvis as Danny Fisher? Or would they just see their singing idol? Then he saw Elvis. He looked magnificent in a sharp suit, his charisma radiating even in the throng of people. He was surrounded by fans and reporters, but his eyes scanned the crowd. A genuine smile of warmth and recognition lit up his face. He nodded a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. The film began. Curtiz sat in the back observing the audience. He watched as they quieted, drawn into the gritty world of New Orleans and the complex life of Danny Fisher. He felt their collective gasp, their tears, their laughter, and most importantly, he felt their connection to Elvis's performance. Elvis on screen was mesmerizing. He wasn't just a singer anymore. He was Danny Fisher, rebellious, vulnerable, charming, desperate. His eyes, his body language, his voice, every facet of his being was in service of the character. The audience wasn't just entertained, they were captivated, moved by the raw emotion he poured into every scene. When the credits rolled, the theater erupted. It wasn't just the cheers for Elvis's music numbers, it was a resounding ovation for his dramatic performance. People were talking, buzzing with excitement about his acting. Later at the after-party, the critics were already weighing in. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, especially for Elvis. Presley proves he's more than just a singer. He's a formidable dramatic actor. King Creole is a gritty, powerful film, and Elvis Presley delivers a performance that will silence his critics. Under Michael Curtiz's masterful direction, Elvis Presley reveals a depth of talent that is truly extraordinary. Curtiz read the newspaper clippings the next morning, a profound sense of vindication settling over him. He had been right. He had seen it. The something special. He called Elvis. Later that week, Presley, Curtiz said, his voice laced with uncharacteristic warmth. "Have you seen the papers?" "Yes, sir," Elvis replied, his voice full of genuine excitement and humility. It's more than I ever dreamed." "You earned it," Curtiz stated. "Every bit of it. This film will change things for you. You have proved you can be a serious actor. Do not forget that." Elvis was silent for a moment. "I won't, sir, and I won't forget what you taught me. You opened my eyes to a whole new world. You made me believe in myself in a way I didn't before." Their conversation was brief but meaningful, a silent acknowledgement of the profound impact they had had on each other. King Creole went on to be a critical and commercial success, often hailed as Elvis Presley's finest film performance. It proved to the world and to Elvis himself that his talent extended far beyond his revolutionary music. For Curtiz, it was another feather in his cap, another testament to his directorial genius. But for him it was more than that. It was the satisfaction of having seen potential where others saw only a fleeting phenomenon, of having nurtured a nascent talent, and of having helped a young man discover a profound depth within himself. He had seen the raw diamond, and together they had polished it into a gem. Elvis Presley would go on to make many more films, some better than others, but King Creole remained his benchmark as a dramatic actor. The lessons learned under Curtiz's stern but loving guidance stayed with him. He carried the confidence, the understanding of emotional honesty, and the belief in his dramatic abilities that Curtiz had instilled in him. Years later, Curtiz would occasionally see a photo of Elvis, still the king, but now with a maturity, a certain gravitas in his eyes that wasn't there before King Creole. And in those moments, Curtiz would remember the hesitant young man on the set, the raw talent and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had been right all along. He had seen something special, and he had helped it shine for the world to see. It was a heartwarming legacy, a quiet testament to the power of belief, mentorship, and the enduring magic of Hollywood.